Yeah, it's another one, another Beyond the Veil, an unusual podcast. Thanks for joining us tonight on this special Friday. About to take flight. We don't deal with nothing too light. You know what I'm saying?
Indeed.
We're your hosts. I'm Jay.Drewz. This is T, Manu L, aka the Black Sun Shaman. We're gonna kick it off for you tonight. Yeah. What's going on, brother? How's it going?
Man, everything is going well. Going out across this grid, podcasting from the car today as I'm traveling on this real grid, this real earth grid.
For sure. For sure. How's life treating you so far?
Yes, indeed.
How's life treating you so far down that way?
Oh, everything is going good, man. I'm down here trying to explore some of the family roots. You know what I'm saying? Encountering some of my family and everything like that, and that kind of corresponds to what we building on tonight.
It sure indeed does. You took the words right out of my mouth. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, Freestyle Friday. You know, the last one we did was kind of great. So, we just decided we'd give you another one. You know, we're gonna keep this going. Not every Friday is gonna be a Freestyle Friday per se, but you know, when we feel like free flowing spiritually and mentally, you know, it's good to go with that flow. We do have a little bit of a framework, what we want to, you know, touch on. You know, these are just a couple topics. We're going to deal with generational DNA coding, binding and loosing, aka withholding and releasing of energy within the various fields of magnetism. Yeah, man.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
Yeah. So we were talking the other day, and then we were speaking earlier. You made mention of things that deal with generations. Right now, both of us are kind of doing our genealogy, you know, journey, and we're not dealing with DNA, y'all, and that's a whole nother topic. We're not dealing with the DNA ancestry, put it that way, route. We're dealing with actual, you know, paperwork, documentation, etc., records, living family, you know, their connection to family that's transitioned and passed on or crossed over, as some would say. So, yeah, man, absolutely.
Yes, indeed. The genetic inclinations of people, man, change with the climate, the location, everything like that. You'll see people are more fit to the locations that they've been in for several generations. That whole Trail of Tears process in our country, I wonder how much that affected the genome if people had been not just the Trail of Tears. I mean, everybody being displaced that was displaced from their original landmass. I wonder how much damage that did to the DNA work that had been happening, or what do you call that DNA when it's a change in your DNA due to atmosphere over time, genetic alterations.
Alterations, evolution.
Yep.
Yeah,
I wonder how negatively that was affected when they started, misplacing people all over this planet, or colonizing, or whatever you want to call it.
absolutely. Well, it would be a manifold effect. You know, it would be various effects that would, you know, take place and change, you know, the original people of those locations, locales, um, you know, from just, you know, the way that they speak to the way that their thoughts are processed because of, you know, we self speak before we audibly, share our thoughts with others oftentimes, and so that even that self-talk would switch up, because you're not in a natural atmosphere any longer. You're in the same environment, but the atmosphere has been shifted. you know you're not breathing freely, so to speak. You're being colonized, oppressed. um,
So if genetics are changed by natural progressions of atmosphere and natural exposure to atmosphere, then there could also be genetic alterations from people putting synthetic or programs or making your conditions a certain way. That could also have a genetic effect. Just like we call it evolution or genetic alterations that came about due to those time spans. I wonder, can that? Well, I mean, I don't wonder. That would also be able to be affected if people put people in a certain atmosphere, put them under certain conditions, or put them under certain frequencies, even that would change their genetic
Makeup.
makeup. Yeah.
Hmm. I would think definitely. We're talking about displacement. We're talking about colonization and the effects it has on our genetic makeup, the alterations that are caused by these things. Uh, but what about what we were born for? What about what was already in,
Mm.
the pre-existing coding, so to speak? You know, what comes to mind for me, something you and I have spoken on a few different times, is uh, the generation, of a certain energy, right? The representation of a certain energy. For example, if we delved into religion a bit, Matthew chapter 1, verse 1, the book of the generation of Jesus Christ, right? Son of
Mhm.
David, son of Abraham. And of course, within the confines of religion and theological study, uh, there are guidelines of exegesis, homiletics, hermeneutics, the expression and interpretation of scripture, um, the general thought that's being conveyed, and it's usually agreed upon by what a council of clergy, something to that effect, right? So I don't want to delve so much only into that understanding of it, but let's expand, right? So the book of the generation, when we
Mm.
deal with the generations, we deal with the word generation specifically. When something is generated, it's brought forth, it's produced, right?
Mhm.
Uh, it's yeah, it's produced. So when we talk about producing or reproducing after one's own kind, let's imagine, if you will, things that we could read per se within ancient texts. Um, we would talk about what the Anunnaki. We would talk about
Mhm.
what so-called race of beings or races of beings that were foreign to the Earth at one time, what we call Earth now.
Yeah. Even Adam and Eve came about in a garden. They were put in the midst of a garden by some beings other than themselves.
A laboratory, right? An
Mhm.
outdoor, an externally produced laboratory environment in which they could be observed, and they could be programmed, and they could be, you know, uh, allowed to evolve, grow, right?
Mhm.
Learn. So, when we deal with that, we deal with the concept of, imagine an assembly line within a factory, and you have a line of product that is being produced and generated, that is coming off of that line. And the way that you would be able to identify it would be through some type of code or number,
Mhm.
right? Whether it be a barcode or whether it be a number or a sequence of numbers. Uh, and so when you think of genetic alteration and the generation of specific genetic coding, what comes to your mind? What do you think about?
Oh man, I thought you immediately made me think about light codes and melanin content, because if you have melanin content that has been developing over time for a specific uh, uh, amount of sun or a specific band of sun. Say the sun in Jamaica is not the same as the sun over here, or the sun in China is not the same sun exposure as it is here. You made me immediately think about these different races, and back to us talking about displacement just a little bit. If they were displaced and they had developed genetics that was the most useful for that particular part of the planet, then by putting them in another location, you may throw off their very genetic coding, in the sense that their coding had developed to be able to deal with that bandwidth of light or darkness in a way that made it most useful for themselves. So if you put a person who had developed a strand of genetics that was good for the sun in a dark room, then that is an immediate shift in their ability to perceive, shift in their ability to transfer energy, shift in their ability to access the genetics that they were previously utilizing to have them in sync with their surroundings. But yeah, that specifically is what you made me think of, is that melanin content and genetic coding would have direct relation to light and light codes as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, the light codes would be passed down generationally, uh, not just through the sun and the intake of the sun breaths, um, the light codes transmitting not only through the breaths, but also through the pineal activator, in the front of the brain, also referred to as the third eye, which is really the single eye of focus uh, on light.
you,
Uh,
you, it's funny. They say they'll tell you use your inner sight.
mm,
They'll tell you inner guidance systems. They'll use words like this. And I thought it was interesting when you discover the makeup of the pineal gland. It has the same makeup as an eye does. So if
hmm
you were using the inner sight or inner guidance system, then you would be utilizing the eye on the inside. But then they said that the eye doesn't function the same as the way as it would on the outside. I wouldn't imagine it would. It would have a whole different spectrum that it was reading than a spectrum outside of you. And the pineal gland is calcified by fluorides and other additives to our food and water system. So a lot of the inner sight capability that we would usually have access to has been kind of frozen up by that pineal gland being frozen up by fluoride and other things in the water. So we don't get to even there access our inner sight or have a inner awareness level that is high, and that in itself could affect our genetics, because we're not as sensitive to what's going on in the inside when we have a calcified pineal gland, because our inner awareness is being limited. So things could be happening on the inside that we used to be aware of, or used to be able to see, function, understand. And as time progresses with this calcification of the pineal gland, that's going to have a genetic effect on us as time progresses, because its capability to perceive has been thrown off for at least 2 generations now.
yeah, at very least. As we're talking, and building on this topic, it brings to mind, some other references I just want to touch on, if we can. For the audience, I think you mentioned this before. I'm pretty sure on a previous episode, but you used to be a pastor,
Yep.
and
Yes, indeed.
while I never stepped into that office, I've been um, I don't know how to word this, but I've been requested or approached to be, a youth pastor or also a minister within the clergy of, a few different organizations over the years. But, I respectfully decline. I feel like my journey, my pathway was intended for what I'm doing now. And not only this, but, in other ways to be able to reach out to people and help them find the truth for themselves. But in respect to that, let's see. Gonna share so I'm not making anything up.
Mhm.
This is the first scripture that I was dealing with here. So this is speaking of the genealogy of the Christ. And when we refer to Christ, we're not just referring to the physical man that was anointed with that title among 16 others during various time periods, but we're referring to the one that the Bible refers to as Christ and the spirit or inspiration of the Christ, also aka
The
the
King of all ages.
yes, absolutely. And as Paul referred to it as putting on the mind of Christ. So this is what we most seek after most. I should say we seek after most. So this is the book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David and the son of Abraham, and it goes through the genealogy. I'm not going to read the entire thing, uh, but it says so. I'm going to verse 17. So all the generations of Abraham to David are 14 generations, and from David until the carrying away into Babylon are 14 generations, and from the carrying away into Babylon unto Christ are 14 generations. Uh, Now the birth of Jesus Christ was on this wise: when as his mother Mary was espoused to Joseph, before they came together, she was found with child of the Holy Ghost. We'll put a pin in that there. And this is Yeshua speaking, Matthew 16, verse 4. A wicked and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign, and there shall no sign be given unto it, but the sign of the prophet Jonas. And he left them and departed. Now we just saw one of the prophecies of Jonas manifest in the month of April. Remember that?
Oh yes, yes. The Jordan. I mean, not the Jordan. One of those Middle Eastern. You're talking about the draining of that water.
Oh no, that's Revelation.
Oh,
Referring
excuse
to
me.
no, you're fine. No, that's
Mm-mm-mm-mm.
we're referring to the eclipse.
Oh, okay.
The
Yes, indeed.
cities named Nineveh and all of the other correlations with that alignment of the path of the so-called eclipse. But this is Philippians 2:14 and 15. Do all things without complaining and disputing, that you may become blameless and harmless, children of God, without fault in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you shine as lights in the world. And then lastly, but not least, ye are of your, this is Yeshua speaking, John 8, verses 44 and 45. Ye are of your father the devil, and the lust of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. And because I tell you the truth, ye believe me not. I know you want to go in on that.
I just wanted to say that the Rand is the Rand, the name holds information. So if you have something starting in the Garden of Eden, you have experimentation or root races or a root race being developed in the Garden of Eden, and then you got the names. then the name, and then which is a REN, which holds information, is how you determine somebody. So as we study, it was interesting. You said 14 generations. I almost wanted to stop you there. Remember when we did the study on RNA and how RNA had 15 to
Yes.
20 generations? So they're talking almost the intervals of RNA memory. When you say 14 years, you're one number away, you know what I mean, from the 15-year mark of the ancestral records that are held within your RNA. So it also made me think of the names that they change. These names are changed to protect the innocent. We got Jesus, no J existence. It don't translate to Jesus in the English language. I don't know why you're using that name. Yeshua translated into English is Yahshua, or however they spell it. That's how you translate it in English. So what is the purpose of you actually using this Jesus name or Ren or to express? But then it kind of made sense as you were talking. If our genetics hold information and our Ren holds information and you got a family name, then you're able to potentially access these genetic records through this resonance. If you change the resonance or take away the resonance from people or take away their name, then you potentially keep them out of the record, or at least not able to directly, knowingly access the record or the REN like that.
So let's deal with that. Let's go with the etymon. Let's do it. I feel like we need to share this. Let's deal with the terminology name. It's a noun. Now this is the etymology. This is the root and the origin of the term name. Word by which a person or thing is denoted. Old English nama, noma, name. Reputation, from Proto-Germanic namen or namen. Source also of Old Saxon namo, Old Frisian nama, Old High German namo, German name. Middle Dutch name, Dutch naam. Old Norse nafn, Gothic namo, right? We can keep going.
Mm.
Nomen, name. The meaning, a famous person. We could stop right there, but let's not. It's from 1610s. Man of name, man of distinction is from 1400. The sense of one's reputation. It keeps going back to that, right? So,
Legacy.
so for example, when the Bible refers to Christ as having a name which is above every name, that at the name, the mention of his name, every knee would bow, every tongue would confess that he is ruler to the glory of God the Father. Now we would have to go into some more breakdown, um, into this. But let's deal with the name, which is really more so a title, Yeshua or Jesus Christ. When we deal with that, we're dealing with Jesus, Isus, Yeshua, Joshua, Yahashua, Savior. It means Savior, one that saves or one who saves. Uh, we deal with the study of soteriology, which is what makes Christianity unique in theology from other religion and from other spiritual systems.
The
What's up?
be careful not to go into a certain behavioral pattern that biblical text says. Be
Yes,
be certain not to go into a behavioral pattern, because the sins of the father will be passed down unto the following generations, however many generations they
four,
said.
4 to 5,
For
four to five.
okay, so that makes me think of again this genetic record. So
Yeah,
if we're dealing with generational curses, we're dealing with generational trauma, then this may be a direct result of the genetic record that houses a name. But then even further than that, when you get into secret organizations, I just won't name them specifically as not to offend anybody. But when you get into these organizations, they start talking in terms of legacy. And it'll be a family line that's coming down, and they'll talk in terms of legacy, just like Kings or the book of Kings and the Genesis book speaks of that lineage. They're using the same legacy to house a certain type of information. And they don't even tell people who are a part of these legacies unless they join their group, so that the information can be utilized to aid those secret societies or societies as opposed to aiding a family line or aiding a specific group of people. I imagine if everybody in your line was great preachers, then y'all make the best preachers. So somebody would want you to preach under their Kojic ministry or their whatever ministry, as opposed to preaching up under your family's name. That way they could utilize the gifting that had come down or had been passed down through genetic record. Yeah, yeah. But you just made me think of all of that while you was talking. it was all it was all breaking down as you was building.
All right. So yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So when you spoke of that generational sin,
hmm
it's also referred to as a root. So we're gonna go to Encyclopedia Britannica. Just want to share this with the viewers as well, because we're gonna tie this all in somehow. Just bear with us. This is a freestyle, so we didn't really plan any of this out, so to speak.
Oh,
Now,
and it's definitely tied in.
so sin in Mesopotamian religion prior to Hebraism, as some might refer to it as Abrahamic tradition, Mosaic law, all these other references that would be of a more religious, modern religious contextual uh, ideology or thought process. Sin in Mesopotamian religion is the god of the moon. Sin was the father of the sun god, Shamash. Okay. And in some myths of Ishtar, Inanna, or of the goddess of Venus, and with them formed an astral triad of deities. Sin is considered
Oh
a member
no, no.
of the special class of Mesopotamian gods called the Anunnaki.
The song by Rihanna. Oh na na, what's my name? Oh na na, what's my
Yeah,
name? What's my name?
she's she's definitely invoking uh, that bloodline, right? And this goes into what the point of our conversation, even with the religious and biblical uh, references. We're trying to show you where the origin of all of these things actually started, and also how we got where we are now with it to a point. So when we deal with the word iniquity, iniquity deals with the root of misdeeds. It deals with the origin, the starting point of a course of action that is misplaced, out of order, in rebellion, in contrast to, on the contrary to, etc. So the origin of this, it deals with sin. If you go into the ancient text in the Sumerian tablets, of course, there are more than just one set. Uh, the ones I'm familiar with are the Enuma Elish, the Epic of Gilgamesh. One is also referred to as Atrahasis or Atrahasis, which deal with this bloodline, this family feud that started. Uh, And when you study the origin of sin, it has not to do with a man named Adamu or Adam or a tribe of people named Adamu or the male and female in the garden laboratory that were called Adamu and then given this separate nomenclature of Adam or man and woman. Okay. What we're really referring to here is the first son that came as a result of a rape.
The son of perdition. No, let me.
Yes, the minister of offense, the son of perdition. Okay, those of you who are familiar with the Bible, great. If you're not, look it up. You have Google. You can go to Bible Gateway, like I did, to pull up the King James, New King James, ESV, any version of what's to refer to as Bible. And you can look up the other books as well. I believe Torah, Quran. You can. There are different online references if you don't have a hard copy at home, or you can go out and purchase one. It wouldn't hurt you to have that in your possession just for your own enlightenment, encouragement in some instances, and betterment in some instances. But sin has an origin. But if you look at the etymon, the way that it's presented, it's a little disingenuous. I'd say more than just a little. Middle English, sinne, or sin, S-I-N-N-E. From Old English, sin, S-Y-N-N. S-Y-N, violation of divine law, offense against God, moral wrongdoing, also injury, mischief, enmity, feud, guilt, crime, misdeed, from Proto-Germanic sundio. Now, I'm going to do this right here in front of you, and I give all credit to a man by the name of Taj Tariq Bey. Shout out to the great teacher. He's the one that brought this to my attention early on, though he didn't focus on what I'm getting ready to highlight for you. God. So an offense against God. We're dealing with the religious context of sin.
Oh, I know where you're about to touch. Yes, indeed.
So God, supreme being, deity, the Christian God. So we already know who threw this in there. Image of a god, godlike person, from Proto-Germanic, Guten. Source of Old Saxon, Old Frisian, Dutch, God. So we notice where these linguistics are, okay? I hope you all are taking note of this. Old High German, Gott. German, Gott, with two T's. That was just a joke, y'all, but it's really Gott. But Old Norse, Good. Gothic, Gup, which is of uncertain origin, they claim. Perhaps of Gut, G-H-U-T.
Lies.
That which is invoked. Of Old Church Slavonic, Zovo, to call. Sanskrit, huta, invoked. An epithet, I want you to pay attention to this, an epithet of Indra. From root, Gu, I don't even know how to pronounce it, but I'm going to just guess. Gu, G-H-E-U, to call, invoke. The notion could be divine entity summoned to a sacrifice.
That.
Now, I want you all to pay close attention to an epithet of Indra.
Right on.
That is an early name for the god known in Sumeria also as Inkai or Inki. That is a name that was given to him earlier on. So when you're referring to God, no matter what religion you're referring to, the inference etymologically, as I was always taught by one of my great mentors and master teachers growing up, you go to the etymon to find the root, the beginning of the resonance of that name or that reference.
You know you have went there. When these people who use the 72 demons, Geo. They use a name.
Geisha.
They yeah. They use a name. They invoke a name. Then the name brings on personality attributes. In the Metuneta, they use names. The different names that they use bring on personality attributes. So you talking about him being the origin? If you know his name, then you should be able to tap into those records DNA wise. So if you know the original name of the progenitors of, let's say, the red root race, the brown root race, the white root race, the black root race. If you know the original names, which are the hardest ones to find, they keep all of these censuses, they keep all of these things. They've even misnamed them deities in some cases. The older names of our lineages, they've misnamed deities. You know
So
what I mean?
yes, and it's intentionally done the same way it's done when they mispronounce your name because it's more ethnic than they care to deal with.
Mm,
So your name is Tyshawn and they want to call you you know, Ty Boy. Like, nah, my name's not Ty Boy, my name's Tyshawn. Right. Just
mm,
bad example probably, but who cares? I'm just giving you, just a general example of how these things are done. But now we get back into religion, referring to the title Christ. Christos is where that word in English comes from, and prior to the Greek, we have Karast in
God.
the Nile Valley civilization culture, and then prior to that you have Krishna. Okay, all this deals with the anointed one, the one who has the chrism oil released within the crown chakra, right? So the higher resonance or the enlightened chamber, or the brain or the skull cavity being filled with light from that particular candle or angel or source of light, uh,
Yeah.
brought about through the holy breath, also referred to as Mater della Rosa in Latin, and the Holy Ghost within Latin reference. Uh,
Hmm.
what's the word I'm looking for? Liturgical writing, religious liturgical writing. Okay. Go ahead. You have something?
When you say this, the speaking in tongues, the speaking in an unknown language, but when and then even in the speaking in tongues that allows you to speak languages that you've not been privy to.
Light language.
Okay, uh, wh- go ahead. Oh,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah, I was agreeing with you. I'm saying yes,
yeah, yeah,
light
yeah,
language,
yeah.
tongues,
Indeed. So
tongues as of a cloven fire.
So if you're speaking an unknown language that you've never learned before, that information can be held in your genetics. If you're speaking a unknown tongue, then this could be further back than recorded history linguistics.
Let's say it like this, unless you disagree. Higher up generationally, as the
Mm.
Anunnaki are the ones who from the heavens to earth came.
Oh my! And the reason for keeping you into certain patterns of music, certain patterns of speaking, to keep your name from you, is so that you don't.
You don't have claim to your birthright. Go on and say it to get your estate, both carnal and reincarnated estate,
Mhm.
that which
Mhm.
belongs to you. Because that's where I'm headed with this. I'm sure you probably had an inkling or so. Uh, but I want to show the justification as best I can at this moment, being that this is freestyle. I took a few notes because I didn't want to lose, context throughout conversation, because you and I can bounce around and stay with each other, but we don't want to lose an audience.
Right on. Right on.
People might want to take note and have question about certain things later, what have you. But when we deal with that generation, man, we dealt with some of the names and some of the people or entities, however you want to view them in retrospect. We dealt with the chrism oil, the anointing, the carasting, the symbolized by the hands raising up, the invoking of the proper nomenclature, whether it be by nickname, title of authority. These all work, right? It's not to uh, cast aspersion upon anyone who believes that you have to call upon a specific name, even though they're not really names that you've been given. You've been given titles. When you deal with Allah, it comes from Allah. Uh, it means the power. It doesn't even mean God or the God. That is a mistransliteration and is often given to, our Muslim brothers and sisters here in this part of the world to take you just close enough to where you believe, but not far enough to tap into knowing, if that makes sense.
And then there's fake setup pools for you too. Misnames, names that pertain to a certain line of work, Smith, and other names that pertain to work. So they want you to when you're utilizing those names also have a pool of information associated with them, as far as labor and what do you call it, modern day or olden day slavery experiences. What I mean by that is people working in a certain field not to their benefit but to the benefit of another family line. If all you remember is your work name and not your line name, then your genetic memory will tap into that position.
Indeed. I just want to jump back here before we move to the next portion of the conversation, um, because this is so relevant. So we just spoke about the attributes. We didn't even get into the authorities because it's more than just one authority of Christ. But we got into the attributes, some of the attributes of Christ, of the Christ mind or the Christ consciousness, as some like to refer to. I prefer that reference, but it's not to confuse people with the physical person that actually historically did exist, that was called by these titles in one generation. Okay. I want y'all to focus on that too. One generation. But it says this is the book of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, son of Abraham. Now we could go into the meaning of those two, but let's stick with where we're at for the moment. Okay. Now I'm going to jump to another one. We know the attributes of the true Christ, the true one that bears the mind and spirit of the living Christ. Let's go here. Now, Philippians 2, verses 14 and 15. Do all things without complaining and disputing. So this is warning you as to what you don't want to do if you want to maintain and continue without your genetic code being rewritten. Because we know that words, sounds, right, vibrations can reprogram your genetic code. It's a scientific fact. I'm not here to argue with anybody. Hopefully, you've been following along with us, and you've also hopefully heard of a man named Billy Carson, another man named Dr. B. Serious. These men actually spend money to travel and gather not just data, but to learn, to actually put in practice these things. But do all things without complaining and disputing, that you may become blameless, and harmless, children of God without fault. Children of God, we already told you the etymon of God, without fault, in the midst of a crooked and perverse generation,
Wait a minute.
among
So in
whom you shine as lights in the world.
follow the program so that you don't get in trouble in a world where you gotta follow the program or get in trouble, and don't use your own source codes or your family's codes, or that's going to be a problem for you.
Interesting interpretation, and I would say yes. That is definitely a way you could say that for sure. Now,
Wow.
now let's see what the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 16, verses 4 and verse 4. In fact, let me see if I can pull up the previous.
So that would be like the term Niji versus the other term that I'm not gonna, the other derogatory term that sounds similar to it.
Oh yeah,
One one is a resonance to your genetic origin, and one is a derogatory term. So
right.
it gets you to the point that even if you hear your original term Niji, you may have a knee jerk reaction of repulsion based on what we were programmed to think the word and view the word as.
Right. So it's this same game. We were the name game. When you alter or pervert, let's see. He just told you this is. I'm going to go right here. He's getting ready to tell us again. The text is getting ready to tell us. So let's start at the beginning of the chapter, since it's the fourth verse, where the key verse is that we're focusing on. The Pharisees also with the Sadducees came. And tempting desired him that he would show them a sign from heaven. He answered and said unto them, when it is evening, ye say, it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning, it will be foul weather today, for the sky is red and lowering. O ye hypocrites, ye can discern the face of the sky, but ye cannot discern the signs of the times. A wicked and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign. So we know the genetic code when you come to us.
And then they hit them with, don't go mingling with those people over there because they got a certain behavior type. And if you mingle with them, you going to be like them. Don't marry, don't even touch a Sumerian. And anyway, I'm sorry. That just definitely gave me clarity on that. It could, if you got a genetic line coming from brothers that were fighting with Enlil and Enki, you got an Enlil line and you got an Enki line. Then you don't want to mix the lineages, especially if they've been fighting and developing, or not, or developing different strands. You don't want to mix the strands, especially if one has a rulership position and one has a slavery position.
So yeah, absolutely. So yes, I mean, and he's telling them the difference between the genetics. He told the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Now these are the ones who claim to be Jews of Jews, born on the eighth day, study in Sanhedrin. They know the law. They went to Hebrew law school. And he says, a
Drake.
wicked and adulterous generation seeketh after a sign, and there shall be no sign, there shall no sign be given unto it, but the sign of the prophet Jonas. And he left them and departed. That was end of conversation. He didn't have anything else to say to them. And when his disciples were come to the other side, they had forgotten to take bread. Then Jesus said unto them, take heed and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And they reasoned among themselves, saying, it is because we have taken no bread. Nah, it's not because you didn't eat today. He just shut them down. They had no comeback. They had no comeback because it was already written. It was already known by the ancestors. His ancestors had already spelled it out for him. When you come across these folks, keep it light, keep it short. Don't go too deep with
Oh,
them.
oh, because if you tap into a genetic record, there is no lying no more. You can't lie to a people who know based on genetic. It's the unadulterated word of God, is what I'm going to say. But the corrupted files. So if you have people telling you, "I didn't kill your great great grandfather," We had nothing to do with the death of that man. But the record is still in your genetic information. They don't want you saying Papa JoJo because, you know, that may unlock the information necessary to know what occurred.
Not only to that, but to prove it and to use it to get back what was taken besides just his life force. So when we deal with a generation, we deal with what? Dispensation of bloodline. We deal with genealogy, we deal with lineage or line age. What's the age of the line? And that doesn't mean how old is just how old is the line. It could mean that as well. But we're also dealing with what age did that line come about in and why? What was that line
Mm,
representative
mm.
of during that age or that era? Because when we deal with age, we deal with era, we deal with eon, we deal with a period. After he said what he said to them, it said that he departed from them. Period. That was the next symbol, was that dot, period. But we're dealing with a period when we refer to time, but we know that time really technically is an illusion. So that's the only reason why I'm leaving that particular terminology kind of dangling, right? You're waiting for me to say it. I know you're watching, waiting for me to say it, right? But here's the thing, that lineage or line age is a birthing order. And when we deal with descendancy or line of succession, we know that Christ was referred to as the Son of God. And he said that those who walked like he walked, talked like he talked, did what he did, would be joint heirs. When we deal with heirs or
Mm.
or heirship, we deal with inheritance, your birthright. It is your right based upon the birth order within the line age that you are supposed to receive this, that this is yours to control. This is yours to be steward over. This is yours to have and to share. It's never just
So,
only for you. It's yours to rule over or govern, to control. Own
mm.
nothing, control everything using the name. You have to cancel joinder between the name and the physical and spiritual man or woman in order to have control over your estate. It is
Oh yeah.
yours by line age, lineage. It is yours by birth order. It is yours by birthright.
And the changing of the name from Orsini to Rothschild to the anyway, I was about to go too far. But
You
the
you
reason
already did. You might as well keep.
the Claymores, I mean, if we the reason they keep changing their name is so that you can't identify them, the the wicked things that they've done in the past or their line has done in the past
His name
because you
ties in.
changed it.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh no, go ahead, go ahead. No, I was just saying.
No, I'm sorry. You go ahead.
No, just changing the name would then thereby change the records. You know what I mean? They would say, "Oh no, that wasn't us. You remember someone else."
Not necessarily the record, bro, but it would disassociate them with that reputation. One of the parts of the definition of the term name, nomo, nomen. So when we talk about the study of names or the use of the practice of naming, it's called nomenclature, right? Almost like nomen nature, like the nature of naming. We associate actions, deeds, same thing, but we associate those things with name. Oh, I heard of you, right?
Mm-hmm.
I know who that is. Oh, you heard of Michael Jordan? He's the GOAT, right? So just by that conversation and that reference to him by title, GOAT, Jordan, the name. Oh, I remember the name. Yeah, Michael MJ. Yeah. Yeah, one of the greatest of all time, or the greatest of all time, however you view it. But the nomenclature, the naming, is what they're disassociating, and they're giving themselves what seemingly is a new name, but oftentimes has the same resonance and meaning. I mean,
So you mean
Redshield, Rothschild,
so
Red Shield.
then then that would mean that they took a name and made it their name that was not their own.
Like probably 80 some percent of the plantations, which is why a lot of people are not finding their records of their roots going back to another continent or landmass, because they were already descended from people. They were descended from people that were almost already here or had just come over and decided to intermarry or reproduce with the people who were already here. So you take their name, you take their property, you take
Ooh,
control,
ooh,
but not
ooh.
ownership. You take control, but not ownership. And now the others, by programming or education, believe that you owned them. And in technicality, I'm gonna go a little step further. They actually did own them by taking control of the land. They would naturally have control over the inhabitant of the land, because the indigenous mindset was that they belonged to the land more so than the land belonged to them. So if I put the land in trust and I call that trust God, then by nomenclature and conceptualization, I've taken ownership of everything in the land, including you.
Is there an organization that calls themselves God, Jay?
The government ordinance department.
Oh, hmm.
Yep.
So
Shout out, shout out to
In
Cosmic
God
Clayton.
we trust.
Is a
Eh,
trust. God is a trust.
Oh, oh. So
So,
they playing with people's.
so yeah, and until the wild, it says it in within the documents, until the wild engine is ready to become civilized, and upon our determination of of their civilized nature, upon that moment we can determine to relinquish control over the entrusted land back to the people. But what is that really telling you? It's telling you, until you become like us, until we can fully see that we have you under total control, until we see that you agree with us and you think just like us and you see the world through our eyes, that's when we'll give you your land back.
I remember there was a in my family line there was a European peasants that came over here. They were looking for a way to have some land and some standing. So I found a case that where John Manuel had come before the court, and he was asking the court that he could have the same legal standing as an Indian because he had been in an Indian family line for 2 years. So they granted him the same legal rights as an Indian. But what was interesting, so a European peasant had less rights than an Indian and wanted to be seen as an Indian and have the same rights as an Indian. So this would suggest to me that number one, the lighter Indian that we see now is a result of mixture, and number two, the land that was taken over, and there were some Native Americans that were taken off of the registry, and some were put on the registry. You know, that is bringing yourself into the genetic line, into the land, and into all of those things through that method, and that's just
Okay, so the interesting factor in reference to that is what they've done, what they've managed to accomplish, is what they've done in their previous lands of inhabitants. Because to say that they had a homeland, there's no, there's actually no historical evidence of such. But their beginning stages of development within Europa, also called Europe, shows that how can I put this? They would always turn things into a politically charged, energetic state. And it was based on initially the divine right of kings. I just want to share this really quickly here. Let's see. The divine right of kings in European history, a political doctrine in defense of monarchical absolutism, which asserted that kings derived their authority from God and could not therefore be held accountable for their actions by any earthly authority, such as a parliament. All right. Originating in Europe, the divine right theory can be traced to the medieval conception of God's award of temporal power to the political ruler. What does this sound like? Paralleling the award of,
Orsini. It sounds like Orsini, the war between the Orsinis and
what else?
the
What else? We saying Orsini, yet that's the Grey Pope, right?
yeah.
So what was the figurehead within the visual realm of the commoner? They called him what? The white. It's the Pope, right? He wears
Yeah,
white.
right.
Mostly wears white. Uh, um, it sounds just like that, right?
Mhm.
God's
Mhm.
God's award of temporal power to the political ruler, but in that case, it would be the spiritual ruler, paralleling the award of spiritual power to the church, right? So by the 16th and 17th centuries, however, the new national monarchs were asserting their authority in matters of both church and state. So what they did when they came here, and audience, you can look this up. Anyone who's interested. I don't know what that is. So sorry. We're not going to do that today. So, they would turn each governing body into an ecclesia. By definition, ecclesia goes back to the meaning of a church, right? It's a spiritual body of officers officiating over religious affairs. Okay.
So this is paralleling Native American standing. I don't know what to call them. The original inhabitants here. When I'm looking at the setup of the church, and then even secret organizations, the Council of Chiefs, the Boule. You understand what I'm saying? They're all mimicking.
Yeah. So this comes from like what we were just looking at, that period of time between the 16 and 1700s is when they crept in with this because it looked so similar, right? But it in fact was them giving away the authority unknowingly in some instances to the big chief on the hill. The big chief on the hill is the Pope that's in white, who's controlled by the black Pope and the gray Pope. And so we still got three different realms. You got white, gray, and black. You're dealing with shades. These are not colors. But they brought those things to us under color of law. Interesting how they managed that, right? So through this ecclesia, they convinced people who were without color, that would happen to be copper to indigo complected, the same color as the soot and soil from which
Hmm.
they claim that the first Adamu and his wife were drawn from, as far as the molecules, atoms, and particles to comprise their physical being. That was one of the ingredients. But if we look at all animal life, it would be synonymous with that as well. So or in syllogism or sync. So the thing is, they manage this utilizing something that we argue with one another over religiously because we have no understanding of what was actually being said within these texts, and we take them to be literal belief systems that were meant to be applied in spiritual theory so that we could evolve in thought to outthink our captor, to outthink our colonizer, to outthink the oppressor. In the Old Testament, there's a text. I apologize for not remembering the exact book text and chapter and verse, but it says, "Envy not your oppressor, choose none of his ways." Now, you don't want to become an oppressor unless you're that type of person, but if you look at your oppressors, some of their ways is the reason why you're oppressed and they are not.
They have Talmudic law that they pass down vocally to one.
But whereas the Talmud is from Babylon, right? So let's look at that. It says what Babylon was great. The reason why I make that statement in that way, because the scripture says Babylon the Great has
Has
fallen
fallen.
and become the habitation of evil ones. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So prior to the fall of Babylon, it was Sumer. They don't want you to visit that time period whatsoever.
Oh, because then you would go back before all of this mess if you go visit that specific,
You
and
would
then they couldn't trick you with any of these schoolhouses like that if you had access to
yes,
that information.
you would be learning about your direct spiritual bloodline ancestors.
Instead of learning whatever whoever Adam and Eve and what was going on there, you would be learning their lineage, their pathology, and in the schoolhouse of religion, and this would be further back than that. So yeah,
And the thing is, that's their lineage, and we're saying it that way with intent because we are not descended from Adam and Eve. I'm sorry to burst your bubble. There were people here before Adam and Eve.
long before.
You study Genesis, the genetics of Isis, the genes of Isis, the generations that came forth through Isis' womb, or Aset. Sorry, I don't even want to use the Greek because, like I said, that Slavonic, that Greek, Proto-Germanic, the Norse, all of those are misappropriations and perversions of the original resonance and frequencies of the nomenclature. So let's just deal with Aset or Ast, right? The generation that came forth there, when we deal with the discovery of Cain, who was sent east of Eden and found people in a land called Nod or Nod. I asked this question in Sunday school when I was 7 years old. I got asked to leave the class until the end, and I still got no answer. I'm glad that I was tenacious enough in my desire to understand for myself that I continued to study. And I found that, yes, in fact, these people pre-existed Adam and Eve. And this is why when you go back into the tablets of Sumer, you understand that this was an outdoor laboratory. Okay, this outdoor laboratory was ruled over by a being whose name was called Yahweh. And also Satan, Lord of Eden, as Billy Carson has released, his discovery within the translation. So it was difficult for me to come across the discovery that this being that was being taught to me as the almighty, omnipotent God was actually a wicked one that began the fall of Sumer into Babel. Okay, and actually,
Babel had a tower, Jay,
oh,
and
much
and,
later, it was built by
and
the Masons. It tells you that too in the Bible. The
you
Masons.
got an unknown tongue, an unknown tongue And when you're speaking in the unknown tongue, if you're talking pre-Babylon linguistics, you're talking about pre the Tower of Babel when everybody, oh, they're getting too good, smart, and they're going to build something up to heaven and tearing it down. If you're speaking in an unknown tongue and these linguistics, they humorize it, make it something that should not be necessarily operated in, speaking like that or operating in that. If you tapped into the linguistics that were previous to that, then you not only get to the beginning, if you get into the unknown tongue, there was a hominid here previous to the arrival of the Anunnaki that
Yeah,
also would have its information within the pool.
correct. So because Enlil ruined the gene pool, Inky had to come along and try to save the gene pool. And so when they talk about these name codes that's in the DNA, et cetera, I hate to break it to them, but the ones with the Yahweh code only, you dealing with the sons of perdition, you're dealing with the sons of Cain, you're dealing with the literal bloodline of what some people might refer to as the devil. But when you deal with the other genetics, you're dealing with a mixture, an admixture, a triune admixture, which is why they're always trying to posit and force down our throats the concept of a trichotomy and a trinity.
And
Okay.
this is the reason that they would keep putting those names out there that have particular resonance with what they want you to tap into. Oh,
Right.
nah, nah, what's my name? Well, and
But
you know what I mean?
but before we even get there, before there was an audible language, you're talking about people that were communicating through telepathy, that were using telekinesis. They were building structures with their minds and their thought form energy, communicating ideas to one another without even the use of drawing symbols. So when it talks about an angel of language coming to confound the languages, we're talking about someone that taught them how to speak. Or let's say maybe they gave them the gene that developed a voice box, a larynx, a throat. Who knows? You know what I'm saying? But we can definitely understand that they were pissed off with the one that had presented themselves as the Almighty, and twice. Uh-oh. Hopefully Tia will be back here. Twice within the text, uh, we see them stating their displeasure and their dissatisfaction with the way that they are being governed. Sorry, I was just saying twice within the text we see the people as a whole, making reference to their displeasure with how they're being governed. Okay, and then we see reference of that supreme being stating that he was fearful that they would become like one of us. Now, who is the us? The us is the Anunnaki.
Mm-hmm.
Let's not even build up the drum roll and the suspense. It's pretty plain and simple. It's right there in their text. So they're telling you that they would go and tell the humans or the hominids things about one another, like, "Oh, that's not who you think it is, boo. Nah, bro, that's not a good guy. That guy want to keep you stuck working in this laboratory, thinking you actually living a life. He gave you the word, but he didn't teach you what the concept was. So for you to be stuck here, tending to this, and then he sat there and watched you. It says, mate with all of the beings of the field, the beasts of the field, and then decided after the fact to give you a
After the fact. Right.
help you
Yep.
meet your goals in so-called life that you really haven't even seen yet in this one area. I mean, listen, man, I don't know too many of us that even if we had everything self-sustaining in one environment right where we were born, if we would want to stay there, like never see anything else. I'm not saying we wouldn't come back and call it home or whatever word would resonate with that if we spoke differently, but we would want to see some other things. And part of our existence, we would feel some entitlement to see something else. you know, and so that has to come from somewhere else.
Location in relation to genetic coding as well. The frequencies that are made available in different locations, you wouldn't want people to travel. You would limit their travel. You would move them from one location to another with the process of colonization, and they would be moved out of the garden at a certain point if you did not want them to access information that came. Just like there's genetic resonance in a name, the planet is also giving off different frequencies. Different stone sets, different metals also give off different frequencies that have a direct effect on your genetic information. So some people have to be kept out of a specific location to ensure that they do not awake to some genetic information.
Well, that would go along with the grid lines. Absolutely. The grid lines, the what do they call them? The ley lines, also referred to as what's the word they use in South America? It'll come back to me. Um, David said, "Yeah, Land of Nod." Exactly, David. That's where Cain had ventured off to. I think T's device is dying, but yeah. So when we deal with this birthright generation genealogy birthright, we deal with the transition and evolution of mind control throughout generations, or the genealogy of other bloodlines or line ages. And they decided that the next step should be the incorporation of divine order through the appointment of offices, officials, or officers within these positions. And so the sorry about that, y'all. Um, these this incorporation, it actually deals with a corpse, and you are the shell. You're the physical holder of the breath of life. And so without that animation from that source of animus, you become the corpse.
Black, the black signature, the black you is death.
Well,
It's a rare.
yeah, I mean, but black, of course, is black. We're dealing with pale, lacking luster or shine, to be colorless. And once again, we spoke on, earlier, they transitioned us from color to shade, and it convinced us that shades are colors, and then brought
Eh,
us under the color of law, land, air, and water.
wait. So the color of law, if we root races, and then you give us a color of law, then you're applying certain measures to specific genome compositions for
No,
treatment.
okay, let's go further into that. So, sound, frequency, vibration, light, color, all of those can change or alter the DNA code.
Hmm.
Painting your bedroom a certain color can change the brain wave, which is really the most important, as Dr. B Serious, shout out Dr. B Serious, pointed out while speaking with Billy Carson last night. I watched that show, it was excellent. But that can change the frequency of the brainwave activity that will change and alter the DNA
So
based on.
you got the people who run the music industry. See who Kanye West says uses, but they have Kabbalah.
Mhm.
They have the Kabbalah, which is a living language that they keep secret amongst themselves, but with its capability to affect us at all of those different levels, then the Kabbalah that they're using is the reason that they would be the forerunners of music and all of the other industries, because they're using a living language, a layered living language, while
But
we're using one faceted,
they're,
one
they're
faceted language.
they're in control of it. Yeah, they're the key holders. Like if you go back and watch The Matrix, there was a guy that was called the key maker,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
Right, and then the key maker. I'm trying to think of the other guy's title, but he had the Moravi, right? The two Caucasian fellas with gray dreadlocks or locks. Okay, they represent the Merovi, which in actuality the Merovi is the Merovingian kings of France, a very specific location, Versailles, who were said to be the descendants of the Sangreal, which is both uh, the bloodline of Mary Magdalene and the man they call Yeshua. Okay, so these were the descendants of this lineage that the Moors claim connection to and precede the formation of the Knights Templars. So when we see the Da Vinci Code, he's basically giving you the mainline information that you could get from any library. Born in Blood, Lost Secrets of Freemasonry, John R. Robinson, The Head of God, Dr. Keith Laidler. You can get these books because these men had access to the Masonic library, and the Masonic library has all the records and the what's the word I'm looking for? The what's the word? Evidence of the things that would be damnable both to the crown and to the clergy. So oftentimes they're misunderstood because there are those who have given over their lodges to the abuses of power, and there are those who have not, which is why you don't hear me speak one-sidedly against that organization or any subdivision or variation of it, but I do speak skeptically in general because if you're not in it, you wouldn't necessarily. Now there's those of us with great discernment, but you wouldn't necessarily know whether they were given over or compromised, so to speak, or if they were
Or,
standing on the line.
or if they could be playing with your genetics. I mean, if we're dealing with architectural design, we're dealing with music, we're dealing with all of these different forms of frequency outputs and intakes. If they know your genetic line, then they can play to it. So,
To
that's
some
a
to some
potential.
degree, but it's like the Rosicrucian order has stated in some of their documents and recordings. Don't give them your astral chart. The astral chart, which I was, spoken to by a lodge commander at one point in time, was the one thing that he noted I would just need to perfect my knowledge on. But that particular aspect of the gnosis is where they would be able to alter your course most. Now they could alter your genetics and they could make things more difficult. They could cause maladies, malformation, deformities, disabilities, etc. Make your path harder, but they can't really change your total outcome without the chart. And that's where we see nations deciding what day to attack on, what day that they're going to meet and convene their meeting, and what the topic of discussion is really going to be, while the rest of the world is given one narrative, what they will know is supposed to be their main line of understanding within the confines of the agreement with one another. Because the people, of course, are not important. It's all about the top tier of the bloodlines. And who's ever in line during that age feels the justification and the entitlement to do whatever is necessary to hold the line.
Next, man, when our next episode, we got to get into the original hominid versus the Martian when on one of these shows.
Indeed, absolutely. I think people will find that most intriguing. as some might actually have some input, and that would be welcomed as well. Just don't come on here saying something completely unfounded and never ever, you know, discussed. But yo, understand your genetic DNA coding. Understand your generational DNA coding. Understand what line you've been generated from, and understand what lines others have been generated from when you come in contact with them. You know, try the spirit by the spirit. Look at their source of information, inspiration, excuse me, and information. Uh, because oftentimes, like I said, we share data, we transfer data. It is the mind that processes and puts that data in formation. So when you deal with a source of information, if it's not one's mind, it's coming from someone else's mind. Some people are speaking someone else's thoughts. Listen carefully to them, and you will find out what generation they come from.
And my little add on for the end is, don't think the person that speaks to their ancestors and remembers things that they haven't learned to be crazy. They could be more tapped into themselves than they are tapped into someone else.
Absolutely. We are encompassed about by such a cloud of witnesses. It's in the Bible. Just read about it. He talked about ancestors and not talking about ancestor worship, but he's definitely talking about even inviting the ancestors to come into a house of service in order to invoke or call upon that which is from within in order to what? Receive inspiration for healing, for having more love, for learning, for knowledge, for gnosis, right? For understanding, which takes you to a higher degree of learning. That understanding, because now you comprehend. You don't just stand under, but you comprehend. You take in account of full appreciation everything that has happened to you or to others around you. Now you understand why you went through that. It wasn't for you at all. It wasn't for you to suffer. It was for you to come through on the other side and say, huh, I see you going through what I went through, and I can help you through it. You're almost there. I can't do it for you, but what I can do is encourage you to know that it's almost over.
This
And
this that's the fear that they have of self-discovery, Jay. That's the fear that they have of self-discovery, that it'll utterly ruin every book that they line in. That's their fear.
indeed, well said. Indeed, yeah, man. Well, we appreciate you showing up and showing out. Thank you so much to our viewer, our one viewer at the moment in the live. It's all right. I understand it's a Friday night. A lot of people already have plans by the time we got the link posted, but I'm sure that some of y'all will be catching up with us later tonight or tomorrow or further on down, the weekend or next week. We appreciate the new subscribers. Like, share, and subscribe. Join us on our locals.com community. You can support us financially if you see fit to donate so that we can produce even better aesthetically pleasing content for you, more bells and whistles, and also to help us with more time to research, that we don't have to spend so much time in the grind of life. We appreciate the grind. It's a part of the experience, but we're trying to move further ahead so that we can take some of you with us, and for some of you, we can catch up to you. You might be, a little further down the road than us. Hey, we're here for everybody that wants to be a part of what we're doing, in this journey. Any shout outs you want to give?
Nah, not really. Just you check me out at www.blacksunshaman.com. It's down there
Yes.
in the announcement at the bottom of the screen.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Shout out to the Schwable Room Media crew. Youngstown, stand up, represent. Shout out to the whole crew. Yo, this has been Beyond the Veil, an unusual podcast. And we certainly thank you for joining us. Y'all have a great evening. Peace.
Peace.